Full video on this post to help our visual learners. So I wanted to write a post about why WordPress hosting fails and how to prevent it. So WordPress hosting is one of these things that kind of gets forgotten about when people build websites. They put all this money and time and effort into building this beautiful, beautiful WordPress website, and then they buy some of the cheapest hosting, or they go to a provider who promises them the world, and then they start dealing with challenges. So I wrote a little post about it and why people struggle with it. And there were really four key factors. Now, the first was speed. So speed is such an important thing that must be looked at when it comes down to this. Because if you don't have speed, your website will fail or get hurt by Google. Clients will leave instantly. Your conversion of your website will go down. It's just a huge negative. Now, there are lots of speed tests online which you can use, and we really recommend trialing different speed tests to see how fast your website loads, because it is one of the most important factors. And WordPress does have a challenge sometimes, depending how it's built, at slowing things down. It can be very easy to add all these cool features, but you don't always realize how much that's going to affect your website loading for other people. What you'll also realize is that as you test things out, checking your own website on your computer, it's being cached, which means it's been saved on your local machine. So you don't always get the same experience your clients do. So make sure you test it out on sites where or computers where someone's never been to your website. The second is security. Once you've got your website up and WordPress is all going, your security is not always checked or looked at. Now, WordPress being the most popular platform in the world, it's also the most hacked platform in the world, because it makes sense. If you're going to hack a website, you're going to hack something that can be done again and again and again. So it's so important that you actually work with a hosting provider that's going to check that. It's going to actually update it. And you're also willing to invest regularly in actually getting a team member to spend an hour and a half working on your site and putting in those protocols, because they do change. WordPress is always evolving. And with every update, new challenges appear. The third is maintain to gain, and it kind of comes back to the previous one. It's about actually looking at maintaining your WordPress website like a car. If you imagine your car, if you just didn't service it for 10 years, it's probably not going to go very well. It might not even last 10 years. So if you don't change the oil, if you don't tweak it here and there, WordPress is exactly the same. You need to be updating plugins, sometimes changing plugins. These are the little bits of code that make certain things work. You need to actually be able to invest in that. So don't jump into a WordPress website if you haven't already, unless you're willing to invest in the ongoing maintenance, because it will come back to bite you. We've seen a variety of things happen where sites have not been looked after, and people just don't realize how bad it can get if they're not looking after their website. It's like you don't want your car to break down in the middle of rush hour on the motorway, nor do you want your website to break down in the middle of a marketing campaign. Fourth is search engine optimization. So there's a few different factors here with WordPress. WordPress is a good tool is a good platform for SEO and getting up the ranks in Google. But there are some really key things to consider. So one is site speed when it comes to WordPress hosting. Again, we've touched on that. Speed will affect your search engine rankings, hands down. Secondly is outdated plugins. If plugins aren't updated, this can affect things as well, because if things are broken on your website or false links, or there's a lot of broken links on your site for whatever reason, that can also make Google question your website. So making sure you're actually updating will help SEO in the long run. It's probably the least of these three, to be honest, but it's still important. And then third is site downtime. If you're on a very cheap host, what can happen is if their server gets overwhelmed, your website goes down, even if it's for a few minutes. If Google, for example, tries to look at your site at that point, it can actually hurt your rankings. Doesn't always happen, but it's not something you want to happen. So in summary, if you're going to invest a huge amount of money in your WordPress website and get something that's good, even if you invested a small amount, make sure you actually invest in hosting. Whether you talk to us about it at Virtual Innovation or anybody, Just make sure you've looked at these four key factors and you've actually put something in your budget to make sure your website is continuously updated from a boring technical point of view. You don't have to understand how it's done, but you have to be willing to do it. So that's my little video on WordPress hosting. Hope that's added a little value to your thought process when considering your hosting platform.